The past 15 years, Games Workshop have been in the forefronts of plastic miniature production, both in terms of design and engineering. But is that finally coming to an end? Let's look at the history and quality of Games Workshop plastic kits, talk about making our first ever plastic miniatures, and compare the quality to some of the biggest games in the world. To see, once and for all, is it possible to beat Games Workshop in plastic miniature production? Ever since the late 80s, Games Workshop have produced miniatures in different types of plastics, starting with their first ever plastic kit, RTB-01, the Rogue Trader Space Marine being the first ever Games Workshop plastic kit designed to face off against the metallic Orc Raiders. After this initial release, Games Workshop continued making sporadic miniature sets in plastic, especially for kits that they knew would sell well, such as start collecting boxes and the most popular units. Some of my personal early favorites are the second edition Space Orcs and Gretchens, as well as the Warhammer Fantasy Wood Elves. Since then, Warhammer Plastic have changed and developed more times than I can remember. And so has their technology for making the best possible miniature, with anything from board game minis, single units and characters to probably one of the biggest developments in Warhammer Plastics, the first ever plastic tank. As the first large plastic kit, this was a true revolution in Warhammer design. Since I got back to Warhammer in 2017, we've seen some pretty insane designs from Games Workshop that seem to balance on a single strand of hair, pun intended.
We're looking at you, Jensar.
We're looking straight at your hair. And with the quality of their polystyrene getting better at the same speed as their design, they've been able to pull it off flawlessly. Here are some of my personal favorites. Giant Tsar, the Age of Sigmar Ghosts with their scythe, pretty much all of them, as well as the Warhammer Underworld's Witch Elves with the whip. We've come such a long way since the old Hero Quest plastic miniatures that almost break off when you look at them because they've dried over time. The quality of the shapes, the sharpness of the molds, the way that they manage to hide seams, as well as some of the elegancy of the miniatures. It's difficult to explain, but it's a combination of the design and the quality of the molds and how well they've carved in them. They've always been the company to be in the forefront and push the limits what's possible in tabletop miniature design. Hopefully, this is just in the beginning of what's to come. But to the question of this video, is it possible for anyone to dethrone Games Workshop? Or just match the quality of their plastic?
Over the past years, we've seen a lot of different companies starting to include plastic miniatures into their worlds.
Which I love it.
I mean, it's fantastic. You have games such as A Song of Ice and Fire, Conquest, Malifaux, Star Wars Legion, and Gloomhaven, just to mention a few. Of course, you guys are waiting for it. We're telling you now, we have picked up all of these games, and to spice it up, we even designed our freaking own plastic minis just to see who does it best.
Can we compare it to Games Workshop?
Of course we can.
Know. Kind of to bring everything together, since 2020 we've been working on Sona, the world of Sona, and with that minis. And throughout these last 4.5 years, we've been learning a lot about miniature production, and we've tried pretty much everything out there. We've tried resin, metal casting, we've tried 3D printing from like 25 different printers, COcast, just to mention a few. And with this, it's been interesting to see kind of how can we keep prices down for miniatures, like what's viable and still keep the quality high. And from the tests we've done, we found that probably 3D printing out of these 4 I've mentioned has been
probably the best one, at least in terms of like the actual detail quality of the miniatures.
I totally agree. But it does have a lot of flaws compared to plastic when it comes to everything around it, like building, converting, durability, how it is to paint on top of it.
Just, do you like it as a concept? No.
And even if you hire someone else to do the production, which is the worst part of resin printing, it still feels not even nearly as good to paint on top of it.
You want to be able to go to the local game store, pick up your plastic kit, and then just build it.
It's so much easier. And to be frank, COcast, resin casting, metal minis, it's probably worse on all fronts on all of them. And so, like, we're proper plastic snobs. Let's take this research we've done, show some comparisons, and let you guys know what we think.
To start off this entire comparison, let's start at the end, and really the end where we find, in our opinion, the minis we've found to be just the biggest ick.
Yeah,
And
the things
these are-
that we wouldn't enjoy
Yeah.
having. And that is like your average board game minis. And there's always like the problem when you see miniatures, because there's two main aspects to every miniature that you have. The first one being how well is the engineering done, like how well has it been carved into the tools and the casting itself. But also the miniature design plays such a huge role.
Yeah. First ones to sort of appear on our end tier list here is this Mansions of Madness guys made from Fantasy Flight games that just really doesn't hit the mark.
And I feel like one of the big problems that we have with some of these minis is that it is almost impossible to see if the miniature design is the bad part or the casting is the bad part. It feels almost like both of them are just very subpar, but a lot of the smaller details blend together. So if you look at the faces, you have no eyes pretty much. It's just holes on all the minis.
Maybe they're supposed to be zombies that don't have eyes.
Oh, big brain. And like necklaces and things like that just blends together with the other surfaces, so you don't have clear separation on them. But it's also a big part, like the miniature design is just bad, and that makes it like, even if you had the best tooling and the best engineers to make the minis,
If you're trying to print a square and you have a round STL file,
it's gonna get round. But this is just an average board game. We also have like the more high-end board games that are more focused on the miniatures, like this Witcher board game. And even if the design is okay, and when you look at the renders, it looks quite decent, but just the quality of the plastic, when you get it out, it lacks a lot of detail. It's soft in pretty much every area. And again, it might be a combination that the designers aren't used to making plastic kits. They design them for maybe like a video game, so like the details are too small, it's got too much textures, and it just end up looking quite bad.
And honestly, they might just also save a bit of money buying the slightly larger tools. So when they actually mill out the big plastic injection molds, you don't get that fine detail as with the more expensive ones.
A lot of these, I think, are produced in China, and I think maybe that's why, because the people that make them aren't really into miniatures themselves. It's more like, okay, we have these machines. But then we have something that I kind of think is just on the border what I would want for a game myself, and that is something like the minis from Limbo, where they have, you can really tell that they've used great miniature designers and sculptors. So the minis always look fantastic. But the plastic,
it's soft.
It feels more like the dollar store toys.
Yeah, you know those dinosaurs you had when you were a kid?
Or dragons. Yeah. But even if the mini looks fantastic, you have to have like the best brush control to get any form of details from the minis.
I had a really hard time painting this one. And honestly, regarding the softness of the plastic, that could be an advantage in some cases.
If kids especially are using the minis, or you travel with them to your friends, it's a good thing. Before we move on, let me talk about this week's sponsor, Into the AM. Have you ever wondered why Lucas and I look so freaking amazing in every video? Well, it's not because of our pretty faces, it's because we use Into the AM shirts. And Into the AM makes some of the best graphic t-shirts on the internet. And they are super nice for anyone that's a bit taller, like I am. My personal favorite of the stuff that they have on their website are these t-shirts with a small print in the front and the big one in the back. But in the past couple of months, Into the AM have expanded their inventory and make some really cool flannel shirts as well as graphic shirts. Just look at these beautiful ones that Lucas and I was wearing for a video a week ago. So just follow the link down below, pick yourself up some Into the AM shirts and get an additional 10% off your entire purchase. Because you deserve some nice looking shirts now that the summer is over and you want to look good for the winter. Then we move on to one of the bigger boutique board games, miniature games, which is Kingdom Death. And this company uses some hard freaking plastic. The miniatures do look a bit sharper.
Yes.
But also, it feels like the design maybe lacks focus. It feels like they've ended up somewhere in between like a toy and a miniature that's like made for painters.
Yeah.
The plastic is so freaking hard. Like, it feels like... I don't know, it's difficult to explain, but it doesn't feel like wargaming plastic. It feels more like a toy plastic, like a toy car. One we could break, she said, if we wanted to.
Break what?
Break if we want to. Oh, shit.
And something that we do need to say here, though, is that the Kingdom Death minis used to be really on par with the Games Workshop stuff. Like 15 years ago, these two next to each other, it was so brilliant. It was a perfect proxy. Obviously, Kingdom Death does make both 3D printed resin and resin minis, and the ones we're talking about here are
The plastic.
The plastic ones.
Cast ones. And while I do think that the quality is quite nice, and you can use plastic glue to glue them together, they do look a little bit soft on the edges. And again, I have a little bit of a hard time knowing if it's the designer that aren't designing these for plastic specifically, or if it's because of the casting. It doesn't reach up to Games Workshop level, however. It's somewhere on maybe a 6, 7 on the scale of 10, where Games Workshop would be like the gold. That's a 10. But can you reach to an 11? And then we have what's probably the most popular board game that's come out in the last, I don't know, 5 years. And that's Gloomhaven.
No, it's Champions of Sona.
Oh, sorry, it hasn't come out yet. And it's always one of these things, like you have a dream of making a board game that has the same like impact as Gloomhaven, that like people love playing and how good it is. But even a game like this that sold in over 100,000 of copies makes minis that are just really, really bad.
I'm surprised because like look at the round base here. That's not round.
And I don't know how this can happen because like if you look at the mouths of the minis, like none of the teeth really pop out. You have like all of the details look like they blend together. It almost looks like they've been hand sculpted first.
Yeah.
And then put in like a machine and then do plastic injection molds from that.
But you almost have layer shifts or like a mold shift in this piece as well.
It's just surprising to me like how you can make something that's this popular and still not be able to push the quality of the miniatures higher. But let's leave the board game sphere and head on into
tabletop
games and war games.
And to start this category off, we've got 3 really cool and fun games, and I think we should start it off with the biggest franchise ever, Star Wars.
Yeah, Star Wars Legion and one of their most recent miniatures,
That's it.
Ashoka. And I feel like this game is probably the game that most people have been talking about since probably X-Wing.
Yeah.
Outside of Games Workshop games, of course. And there's a lot of things that I do enjoy about these brews. And I feel like the round shapes and like the straight lines are really, really nice.
Yeah.
Everything feels like clean. It doesn't feel like dirty, messy. It doesn't blend together. Until you look at the face.
Why? The mini, I was like, when you had it this way, I was like, oh shit, I might need to paint that mini.
Yeah.
And then, oh, such a shame.
And the fascinating thing, I feel like, because we have something that's quite similar that we can compare to, and that is one of our elf miniatures. And this is Kiranti. And if you just look at the face of Kiranti and compare that, and I think we should come back to this one when we compare it to the miniatures that we've done, because we have a mini that I feel like is a great comparison to this one. But it just left me a little bit disappointed.
Like one of the biggest issues I have here is like the inconsistency, because in some places you have like super straight, deep,
clear
separated lines, and then you have in these softer areas, those super sharp grooves aren't sharp.
Even with washes, I'm not sure it would pull enough in those grooves. So,
and yeah,
we also have probably the second most popular war game, A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm probably wrong.
And
most
this,
popular.
Can we just take a second and just appreciate companies that does this? I like it.
It's high quality box,
Yeah,
high
bring
quality
it back.
packaging. And the thing that I was most fascinated with these minis is that it's quite high detailed minis, but they've still managed to cast them all in one piece.
Yeah. Oh, no. I don't think it's one piece. I think they assemble them for you.
Oh, it's pre-assembled.
Yeah, you see here on the archer's
and
arms.
on the feet. But in terms of engineering, it does feel like it's like high quality engineering.
Yeah.
The plastic feels kind of nice, a bit harder, so it does feel a little bit more like classic board game minis than the Games Workshop stuff. The thing that is a bit difficult for me to put a finger on is it the casting that makes them a little bit soft? Because it almost looks a bit like the metal minis from like the late 90s plastic from Games Workshop. Slightly soft, but on some areas it's quite sharp.
I'd say these are like probably a slight mix of both. We cut down the budget ever so slightly on the design, and we cut down the budget on the making of them.
Yeah,
so we get like a 7 out of 10 mini instead of a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I think it's nice, and it's probably fun to paint as well.
We know that our dear friend Miniac loves playing and painting them.
And then we have a skirmish game that was really popular here a few years ago.
Yes.
I don't hear a lot about it these days.
No, they ruined it with the new edition.
Malifaux. But I've had a problem with these minis, Lucas. It's a mix of two different things, because when we look at some of these kits, like you look at this girl designed here, the design is a little bit smaller than Games Workshop. Like the scale is maybe 25 millimeters.
I think they have the
minis.
28 true scale.
Yeah, so it's probably, 30% smaller heads and stuff than Games Workshop. And the detail quality is still really good. It does have a bit of that elegance that I mentioned earlier, where it feels like you have a good balance of like making something look realistic, but still look good after the tools are made with the carving, like with the soft shapes and the hard shapes and the separation of different areas. The big problem though is that a lot of miniatures can look good when you pick up like a single mini and look at it. But then you have things like this freaking snake, and you have this freaking monkey.
Yeah.
That is like the ugliest minis I've seen in my life.
You hate the snake?
Yeah, I think it looks ugly.
I think the snake is cool as fuck.
Yeah.
I just don't think it looks like it's the same game.
Oh,
That's been my
sure
biggest issue with the Malifaux ever since released. It just feels like they have like these 10 design teams that design, oh, go and design this guild pack, and then you design these alchemists, and then it's like, oh, herpaderp, it's not even the same company anymore.
Which is
problematic.
So in terms of plastic quality, I would be really happy about this.
Yeah.
It's almost up there with Games Workshop, but we do still have a dark horse in this competition. And who is that? It's actually our own minis that we've made. As we've mentioned, we worked on and off on this Sona project since 2020. And these are the first miniature design. It's 3 minis. And I think we've done about 30 designs so far, but only 3 have been made into plastic on our first test. And the reason that we could make them now is we wanted to release something with the paint sets that we're releasing with Vallejo. It just came out last week.
You haven't grabbed them yet?
And for each one of these paint sets, you get one of these 3 minis.
So grab all 3 and get these 3 super cool minis.
Yes. Hopefully in maybe 2 years you'll be able to play with these in a board game. Essentially what it's all come down to for us, as we mentioned, we've done COCast tests, we've done 3D print tests, we've done resin casting. We just wanted to do something that we enjoy doing, and it ended up costing us way more than it probably should have. So we're not making as much money as we want to do, but making plastic cast minis, like we came in touch with a company called Archon Studios in Poland, and they've only been around making plastic kits for I think it's around 5-6 years, something like that. But oh my god, the increase of quality over the last year and a half, I would say, has just skyrocketed. When we got these first tests, which was a big gamble, I would say, because of how much it cost, just making the base of this sprue is like several $1,000s, like not 2 or 3, it's way more. And when we compare the detail quality of, say, the face of Kiranti to the face we had of Ashoka, you can just see the grooves on the face of Kiranti compared to Ashoka. Even though Ashoka's face is bigger, it has so much more clarity and separation between the different body parts that it's not even in the same, we're not competing in the same league.
And also, if you look here at the armor parts of Kiranti's armor,
compared to Ashoka's armor,
yeah,
it's just way better separation, clearer separation. I feel like one of the parts that I was most happy about is like the midsection of the dwarf and the dwarf's face. Totally. This kit ended up more detailed than the 3D prints that we did on the best printer that we have.
Because these grooves in the leaves, they were soft on the 3D printer.
Yeah, and we've been 3D printing. So
quite a lot.
Yeah, it was
I'm probably the best 3D printer in Europe. Easily.
Stay humble. But jokes aside, we do some decent 3D prints, and this just blew it out of the waters. Even when comparing it to this is the latest Games Workshop kit.
It's not even released yet.
No, so this is the Skaven Critox Foul Blade. Yeah,
it's the dude.
Again, the Games Workshop kits are amazing. So I'm not really complaining, but I feel like we are up there in terms of detail quality of the cast and the engraving and the carving of everything. Yeah, I was just super surprised when we got this and happy that it was over my expectations.
Yeah, we should just get a hold of the Games Workshop designers.
Yeah.
And get them to work for us instead.
Exactly. And of course, we haven't designed, 100 200 minis per year over the last 50 years. But I do feel for first miniature kit, I am super happy what we've been able to pull off. I'm just hoping that these paint sets and the airbrush and the wet palette sells enough so that we can start producing the rest of the 30 minis. And then hopefully we can make our own giant star just balancing on a strand of hair. So were any company able to smack Games Workshop on the fingers in terms of plastic production? Well, not really. While Malifaux reaches a really high quality, it's not quite up there with Games Workshop. And the same thing goes for Star Wars, it's just that the faces weren't quite good enough. Since both Lucas and I are quite biased on our own kits, I'm not gonna put a grade on our stuff. I'm gonna let you guys decide down in the comment section how close you feel like we get to Games Workshop. I feel like we're really closing in. Very much thanks to Archon Studios. So guys, a reminder, if you want to check out the airbrush, the paint sets with these minis and the wet palette, that is all made from the brands that we've been using for 10 years. I guess we want to send out a massive thanks to this week's sponsor,
Into the AM.
Thank you guys for sponsoring this video. And of course, our lovely patrons. Without you guys, we would not be able to do this.
And especially these ones.
The big boys.
Top donors.
We have so many now.
Yeah,
you have no idea how big a difference that makes for us.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. Peace out.